Can you see? Yeah, thank you. Basically, as I am the first speaker for this webinar, so my job is the basically introduction about the supply chain management, introduction about the sustainable supply chain, so that my next fellow speakers they will discuss more on particular topics in sustainable supply chain management. So I'd like to start the basic discussion on that. What is supply chain? Basically, you know that there is a lot of misconception about the supply chain. The first one is that if you ask anyone that what is supply chain, they have described the supply chain in a different way. For your better understanding the sustainable supply chain management, I'd like to start by this one. What is the basic supply chain? When you like to design the basic supply chain, you have to ensure the few something like raw materials, finished product, supplier, customer, flow of goods for the manufacturing industry, flow of service for the service industry, flow of information, flow of fund. So this is the basic something. I think more or less we are familiar with this one, but you just remember that when you like to design the supply chain for the any industry, we have to taking care of these few entities, the three entities. Basically, I think you're familiar also about this one. This is a basic supply chain for manufacturing industry. So when you're thinking about the sustainable supply chain management in the ready-made garments industry, first of all, you have to know that how we can apply that one. So look very carefully. This is the basic supply chain for the manufacturing industry. There will be the supplier, what I said earlier. There will be the customer. Raw materials come from the supplier and finished product delivered to the customer and manufacturer, distributor, retailer. It depends on the type of the business, size of the business, whether they have or not. So that is the basic supply chain of the manufacturing industry. So what I mentioned here that whether the manufacturer or distributor, retailer will be available or not, how many distributors will be there, how many retailers will be there, whether there will be one factory or the two factory. Based on that, we have to design the supply chain. If you have a clear conception about the supply chain, then you can design the sustainable supply chain management. We are talking about the basic supply chain about the manufacturing industry. Now, let us see the basic supply chain for the service industry. So, you know that this is the service industry and the manufacturing industry. There's a basic difference. The service industry, our main prime target is to contribute to the society. The society is the consumer. So, when you are thinking about the service industry supply chain management, we have to think at further how we can contribute by the supply chain to the society. The same things you can see this one that you can see this one, there is a supplier, there is a customer. We have to identify the raw materials for the supplier, and we have to identify the finished product to the customer end. And service provider means what I said that if the hospital supply chain manager, then hospital, if the education supply chain manager, then university. And what I mentioned earlier, then when you design the basic supply chain for the service industry, there will be the consumer, the society. The last customer, the end customer, final user, and user. So now, based on this, we have to think how we can design the sustainable supply chain management in the service industry. We are familiar with the example of the manufacturing and service industry. There are a few examples of the manufacturing and service industry. So when we are now, you have to think that which part we like to focus. We like to focus the ready-made garments industry. We like to focus the textile industry, apparel industry, fishing industry. We like to focus on the vegetable supply chain management. Or we like to come back to the service industry supply chain management, like education supply chain, tourism supply chain, hospital supply chain, something like that. So that is our idea that how we can apply the supply chain in our manufacturing and service industry. You know that we are familiar with this, why we have to need the supply chain management. I don't want to talk too much, but now the day is coming that we have to think about this one. We are thinking about that, like how we can improve the operation. So that when we are designing the supply chain, and this is the input, process, and output. So this is one of our target, how we can improve the operation, how we can ensure the better outsourcing, enhance the profit, customer satisfaction enhancement, generate quality outcomes. This something like that. When you are talking about the service and supply chain management, it's one of the target, quality outcomes. So this is our target, that how we can ensure this one. Due to the global phenomena, now competitive pressure is very high. We have to think about that one. Now, you know that during the COVID-19, we noticed that we are applying the e-commerce lots of time, and there is all kind of communication we are doing now at this moment, the online mode. So how you can manage this one, the whole supply chain? And not only that, if you ask me that how you can define supply chain, I would say it's a very complex supply chain. And day by day, the complexity of supply chain is increasing. We have to think that many things, not only one supplier, many suppliers are there. Not only that one customer, many customers are there. Not only that supplier, we are thinking of the suppliers of suppliers. We have to think of the customer of customers. So that is the way that what I say the complexity of supply chain and how you can handle this one. So you have to analyze the supply chain. You see that we are talking about the supply chain, and this is the historical evolution of supply chain management. I like to give some little bit idea about this one so that anyone can understand why you are too much talking about the supply chain management. If you look back to the other area in the management, like the human resource manager, marketing management, they started their journey 200 years before, 300 years before, 500 years before. On the other hand, if you look very carefully, the supply chain manager, they started their journey by the name of the logistic management. So the logistic management, they started their journey in 1950s in the defense. It's very interesting thing is that basically the military people, they have initiated the logistic management concept. So after that in 1970s, the logistic management concept has been matured. And then after the 1970s, logistics management is incorporated with the supply chain management. If you look very carefully, that the 1980s, the supply chain manager officially initiated the journey. And after that official inauguration of supply chain management in 1980s, then most of the research on supply chain management on manufacturing industry, especially the materials flow, products flow, something like that. And the very interesting thing is that, and until now, if you look very carefully, about more than 85% research on supply chain management in the manufacturing industry, but only the few research, around the 50% research supply chain management service industry. So this is very key point is that when you deliver this kind of webinar as the keynote speaker, one of the target, how you can give the focus on the future researchers, how they can conduct the research. I like to invite the young scholars. You have to do the more research on supply chain management. If you ask me the more particular avenue, I would say that you have to do the service in the supply chain management. And then if you ask me any further topics on that, I suggest the sustainable supply chain management on the manufacturing industry or service industry. Definitely the supply chain management service industry based on the sustainable concept, we could not get lots of papers, lots of research as well. Okay, so what I said that after that 1980s, you see the 1980s, the starting point of supply chain management manufacturing is only 40 years. 1985, supply chain management, they started their journey in the service industry. That is another milestone in the service and supply chain management. Professor Ph.D. he developed the one model on the National Health Service. So that is the starting point of service and supply chain management. 1985 to 2020, only just 25 years. You know what I said that human resource management, marketing management, they started their journey 300 years before, 200 years before. On the other hand, supply chain management, they just started their journey 40 years before, and service industry only just 25 years before. So in the research area, 40 years or 25 years is nothing. This is the starting of the any kind of management area. So that is something, and then 2007, and the milestone in the supply chain management. Professor Lau, he developed the supply chain management for the education institutions. We call it education supply chain management. Unfortunately, in that research, Professor Lau, he developed the model, but that was based on the City University of Hong Kong. That was a case study. So, the case study could not be a generalized concept. And then 2009, the ITESA model was developed. ITESA model was developed. The model was developed during my PhD time. I developed this model with my supervisor. ITESA model stands for the Integrated Tertiary Education Supply Chain Management Model. That is the first empirical study on the education supply chain, and that was the generalized concept, so that any university they can apply this model for the university. That is the supply chain management model for the university. That is an initiative for the service industry supply chain management. I always mention that any kind of theory and concept always starting from USA. And then they come to the masses to the like the European country. Then it will come to our Asian developed country like Japan, Singapore, something like that. Then it will move to the like the our subcontinent like India and so on. So that means that when they like to generate the new idea, new theory, it will take time to come about Asian countries. So that's why even if you look the history of supply chain management, they started the journey officially in 1980s, but it's come to the nation level in the, around the after that one, like the 1990s and 2000. So that's why we have to need more research on supply chain management. I think I already mentioned this one about supply chain management in the manufacturing industry and service industry. I again remind you that there is a lot of research we can do on supply chain management in the service industry based on the sustainable concept. You see that this is some of the examples that what type of research is going on supply chain management in the manufacturing industry. This is that supply chain management in the ready-made garments industry, and this is the supply chain management in the fishing industry. So this is supply chain management in the textile industry. I cannot discuss too much because I have a time constraint, and already Dr. Daisy she said that 15 minutes, so we have to finish it in this time. So that is some of the examples that how we can design the supply chain management for the manufacturing industry. I just remind you again when you are designing the supply chain, we have to think about the like three basic entities like the raw materials, finished product, supplier and customer, how we can go for the flow of goods for manufacturing industry, flow of information, and of the fund, flow of money. That is the service and supply chain management. Basically, this is that tourism supply chain management. I think the Indonesia very strong on the tourism, so they can apply this tourism supply chain management and sustainable tourism supply chain management. So that is some things we can have to think and discuss in the another session, not today. And this is that education supply chain. Basically, if you look very carefully, holistic view of education supply chain, we can also see this one that there is supply input, process, and output. There's the raw materials, two raw materials we identified, and there is one in the student and the international research project, and two finished products we design. One is the graduate, and the research outcomes, and finally contribute to the consumer, the society. This is a simplified form of supply chain management for the university. What I said earlier, supplier, service provider, customer, and consumer, something like that. And we already mentioned the two raw materials, one is the international research project, another student. And we already mentioned two finished products, what I said, the graduates, and our research outcomes. It is very interesting thing is that when we design the supply chain model, it is not only our target to produce the finished product. Our main target is the quality outcomes. That is another discussion. That's why sustainable concept will be there. We have to think based on this one. This is an integrated form of supply chain for the universities. We divided the university in the two segments. One is the education, another is the research. So there will be the education supply chain and there will be the research supply chain. So if you look very carefully in the education supply chain, we have to think the education suppliers, then students, then the university education development, education assessment, then graduate, then education customer, and finally they contribute to the society, the consumer. On the other research supply chain, research suppliers, and then research project, and then it will go to the research university, research development, research assessment. Then it will go to the research outcomes, and then it will be belongs to the research customer that will contribute to the society, the consumer. So whatever you do in the services supply chain management, you have to think how you can contribute to the society, and that's why that sustainable concept is a major issue. How you can think of the social responsible supply chain management, how you can think environment friendly supply chain management. Basically, what I said earlier, this is not only our target to produce the outcomes, one of the target to produce the quality outcomes. So when you are talking about the education supply chain, so in this, that time you have to think of how you can produce a graduate citizen quality, how you can produce the quality outcomes. So this is a very fundamental concept we have to think when you design the supply chain model for the service industry, especially the education institutions. I cannot discuss in details due to the time constraint. Basically, this is the ITESA model, Integrated Tertiary Education Supply Chain Management model. If you look this model, there is a few parts of this model. One is the left side is the education supply chain, and the right side is the research supply chain. And the middle part is education management. So ITESC model, Integrated Tertiary Education Supply Chain Management model, consists of the three parts. The left side is the education supply chain, right side is the research supply chain, and middle project issue management. So look very carefully in addition supply chain. You can see this one, the addition suppliers, then there will be the students. This is the input, supply input. We call it the raw materials. And then it will go to the university. The middle part is the university. This is the middle part is the university. And from the university, you get the graduates. And then you have to, it will contribute to the additional customers, finally the society consumer. On the other, the research side is a supply chain. From there, you get the research suppliers. And then research project will enter to the university, and the university education management, and then from there we have to get the research outcomes that will be there, contribute to the research cost of finally the society. On the other hand, in the middle part, this education management, we divided the university into two segments, this education research, and there were four main activities in the university: education development, education assessment, research development, research assessment. At three decision levels: strategic, planning, operating level. And we identify the four factors in the university: the program establishment, university culture, faculty capabilities, and facilities. It means that we have to think about the education development, education assessment, research development, research assessment, and the four factors: program establishment, university culture, faculty capabilities, and facilities. So you look very carefully, even the development assessment should be concurrently. So what is the ultimate target is what I said earlier. Our target does not only produce the finished product, our target, we have to ensure the quality products, how we can add the values to the society. So when you design that education supply chain, we have to think about this one, whether we can add, contribute to the society or not. You know that this model was developed in the 2009, and after that, after this one, there are lots of research based on this model in the different countries, different universities. They are applying this model for the universities, and then not only there is a few PhD based on this model. One of my PhD students, he developed the next model after this one. He is using this model as a theoretical framework, and then he developed a sustainable education supply chain manager for the Malaysian university. So look very carefully that now we are thinking after this one, as I said earlier, supply chain management, they started their journey officially in 1980s. So when you have this kind of research, now the prospective researchers, young scholars, they are thinking how they can apply that sustainable concept upon the university. Okay, so now you know that why I'm discussing the introduction part, so that you can get some idea that how we have to think that supply chain in the manufacturing industry or supply chain in the service industry, and now how we can apply the sustainable supply chain management. You know that more or less we have an idea about the definition of the supply chain management and the sustainable concept. Sustainable supply chain management involves the integrating environmentally. The environment is the issue. Financially viable practices. So the transparency, financially viable practices into the complete supply chain life cycle, the complete supply chain from the product design and development to the material selection, including the raw material extraction, agricultural production, manufacturing, packaging, transportation, warehousing, distribution, consumption, return, and disposal. Recycle, everything means this whole supply chain life cycle. We have to ensure that environment friendly, financially viable. So that is something. So we have to think about this one. I think the perspective, my colleagues and the keynote speaker, they will discuss about more about this one, how we can apply the sustainable concept. You know, I use the term environmentally sustainable supply chain management and practices can assist the organizations in not only reducing that environment issue like their total carbon footprint, but also is optimizing. This is the most important thing: optimizing the end-to-end operations to achieve the greater cost savings and profitability. You know, this is the cost savings question is coming there, financial viable, feasible as well. During the COVID-19, we are facing this problem. Most of the organizations, they are collapsed due to the supply chain disruption. And now come to the next question, is how we can think, so how can the organization be sustainable during this time, pandemic time. And our main target in the manufacturing industry is to get the profit. So you have to ensure the profit not only at the end, at the one stage. We have to ensure the profitability at every stages. Then how we can ensure this kind of supply chain profitability at the different stages of supply chain. That is our another discussion, another research on that. So now you understand that when you are thinking of the sustainability, the supply chain, and that we have to think of the few priorities. First of all, we have to think the environmental stewardship. If you look very carefully, most of the universities, they prefer the green environment due to the environmental issue. And we cannot do anything against the society, against the environment. So that is for one thing. Conservation of resources. Any university, or not only university, any organization, any kind of manufacturing service, they always mention conservation of the resources. So they don't want to misuse, abuse the resources. A reduction of the carbon footprint, especially the manufacturing industry, they have to apply this one. Textile industry, ready-made garments industry, most of the cases, they're one of the target, how can they reduce the carbon footprint? Financial savings and viability. You know that there is nowadays, we like to apply another new concept of supply chain, that is we call it blockchain supply chain. The blockchain supply chain basically are the financial related. The finance will be there. Finance will be the viable, that the ability, the blockchain, they can see all stakeholders, they have idea about this one. And that's why you remember I mentioned earlier the flow of information. Well, nowadays we are talking about the information will be the integrated information, MIS system. There will be the software base, there will be the ERP base. So there will be the whole industry, all stakeholders, they can get the idea about what is happening, and the information will be viable. What is the financial condition? How we can take the decision for the next step, something like that. During the COVID-19, our already director, sir, he already mentioned this one. We faced this first problem, because we are too much dependent on the China. Any kind of raw materials will come up from the China. When this, during the pandemic time, lockdown was already starting in the China, we couldn't get the raw materials, everything stopped. All kind of financial contribution has been stopped. Raw material, there are raw material, because most of the cases we are dependent on only one supplier. But we don't have multiple suppliers, multi-tier suppliers as well. So financial constantly was a very major issue at that time. Social responsibility. Social responsibility. I just give you one example before finishing for today. It happens everywhere in the world that when there is a work supply chain, it started from supply and it goes to the customer. But sometimes we are not aware what is the chain is going on. Say, I just give one example. So, suppose when the Donald Trump, he took the position as the US president, at that time his cap, that during his inauguration, his cap, and then his t-shirt, all are produced in Vietnam and Bangladesh. But if you ask that, do you know that from where you produce this cap, this t-shirt? Most of the case they said they don't know. Even if you ask the Republican Party, do you know that from where you are getting this? No, because they didn't give this order to Bangladesh. They didn't give the order to the Vietnam. They provided this order to there is one hub. We call it the Merchandiser. Say suppose in the Merchandiser in the Hong Kong. So they give the order to the Hong Kong. Why they come to the Asia? Due to the cost minimized. And then Hong Kong, they are giving the order to Bangladesh. They give the order to the Vietnam. Unfortunately, even the Bangladesh, when they are producing the product, or Vietnam they are producing the product, even they do not know that they are producing the product for the inauguration of the Donald Trump. And then what happened? Look very carefully. I don't want to mention the university name. University, they produce a T-shirt, and that T-shirt is produced in the Vietnam. And Vietnam, those are workers. They are working in that industry. Most of the female and even the female, they are pregnant. They are pregnant. They are working in the industry, and they are producing the T-shirt for the university. When the University of the USA, they get this masses after producing this one. Because this is a responsible, they have to confirm the pregnant woman if they can work until the 9th month. So this is social responsibility. So that means when they will give the order, they have to notify them. We have to ensure who will be our producer, from which factory you have to produce. They have to think the whole chain so that there is some of the compensation they can provide. In Bangladesh, we faced this problem earlier. The problem is that even they don't know what is the destination of their product. But unfortunately, they produce and they are getting only low cost. You just think that the low cost they are getting in Bangladesh, they cannot think. So the question is that, but in the merchandiser, they get a good amount of the money for this production. So now they come to the point that we have to need a viable information for the supply to the customer, and in the whole process, you have to know social responsible, and we have to take some responsibility. We can allow the woman, the pregnant woman, at the month of the 8 or 9. We can allow the kids. There is the age of the 10 years, 12 years. They're working in the industry. They're producing the dress, and then producing the dresses are using the US, and they're using that in the different country. So now we have to think the whole social responsible supply chain management. Finally, the supply chains can be optimized using the sustainable practices. I think our perspective, they also discuss lots of sustainable practices. Basically, supply chain sustainability practices, in order to succeed, must deliver the improved environmental performance within a financially viable operating construct. And how we design this practice, that is another research, that is another question, how we can ensure the supply chain sustainability practices. But before finish, I just give the one key, another forward to discuss in future, smart supply chain management. We have to think nowadays, what is a smart supply chain management? We have to think of the social responsible supply chain management. And that day is coming that, what I said earlier, you are producing suppose the ready-made garments industry, but you have to confirm that you are viable to get the information, the environmental situation in the whole supply chain. You have to confirm the quality outcome, whether it could be the fixed in the international level or not. Is it a local market or international market? That is, we call it the smart supply chain management. Even the service industry, if you think the education supply chain, our target the smart graduate. Those will be the cope up with any kind of technology advancement. Nowadays, we are applying the technology advancement everywhere due to the COVID-19. But the question is that we are capable with the smart supply chain or not. And I already discussed social response supply chain management. That will be another discussion within the sustainable supply chain management. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much. Dr. Daisy, I'm so sorry I'm taking a long time. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.